Welcome to our deep dive, Exploring Your Brain at Work by David Rock.
Oh, this is going to be fun. It's a really fascinating look at the neuroscience behind, how we work, why we get stressed, how we can work together better. I think listeners are going to get a lot out of it.
It really digs into those everyday work struggles,
Yeah.
why is it so hard to focus sometimes?
Right. Or what's actually happening in our brains when we're totally overwhelmed.
And it even gets into how we can almost hack our brain chemistry to perform better.
Absolutely. Rock does a great job of kind of taking all this complex science and turning it into strategies anyone can use.
So to set the scene, Rock uses this really cool metaphor. He compares the brain to a stage.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. So picture the prefrontal cortex, right? That's the part of our brain responsible for all our conscious thoughts, decisions, that kind of thing. He says that's like the stage.
Okay, so there's only so much space on a stage.
Exactly. And only so much energy, right? You can only have so many actors, so many lights, so much action happening at once before it gets, chaotic.
So that's why when we're trying to focus, especially when we're tired or, haven't eaten, it feels so hard.
Exactly. Your brain's stage is just too crowded, not enough energy left for the spotlight to shine on one thing.
Ever hit that 2 p.m. slump?
Oh, tell me about it.
Rock says it's not you being lazy, it's literally your brain running low on fuel.
Makes so much sense.
And that brings us to this idea of prioritizing. Rock makes a big deal about how important it is to prioritize our tasks.
And he's not wrong. Prioritizing, though, actually deciding what's most important, that takes serious brain power.
Like a black diamond mental task, he calls it.
Yeah. Uses up a ton of energy. So his advice is, tackle your toughest mental tasks, the ones that need the most focus when your mental stage is fresh,
So first thing in the morning, after a good night's sleep, after lunch, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. When you've got all those mental lights bright and ready to go.
So you're not lazy for putting off decisions after a long day. Your brain is literally out of gas.
Exactly. Give yourself a break, right?
Now, there's this other cool thing Rock talks about, using visuals to understand tricky ideas.
Oh, visuals are powerful. He suggests picturing a concept, literally making a picture in your mind helps you understand it better.
Because it activates a different part of the brain, the visual cortex.
Exactly. Engages more of your brain, and that makes the information stickier.
So you're picturing the brain as a stage right now, aren't you?
Well, now I am. See? It works. That's Rock's technique in action.
Okay, but this brings us to a huge myth that we all kind of buy into, the whole multitasking thing.
Oh, multitasking, the myth of the modern age. We're all trying to do a million things at once, but Rock actually, he debunks that.
He says our brains can only really focus on one conscious task at a time.
Right. What we think is multitasking is really fast task switching. But all that switching back and forth, it actually makes us less efficient.
Makes you make more mistakes, too.
Totally. Uses up a ton of energy, and you end up making more errors. There was this research by Harold Pashler that really showed that.
So, if you're trying to write a report, but also answering emails and checking messages.
Recipe for disaster. You're not getting more done. You're just getting less done poorly and stressing yourself out in the process.
Okay, so if our brains can only focus on one thing at a time, how do we manage all this stuff we have to do? It feels impossible.
Right. Well, Rock has a brilliant solution for this. He suggests we outsource some of those repetitive tasks to a different part of the brain.
Wait, what? How do we do that?
He talks about the basal ganglia, which is our brain's routine storage system.
Okay, so automatic pilot.
Exactly. Think about driving, right? Once you learn, you don't have to consciously think about every step. It's your basal ganglia takes over.
Interesting. So we can embed habits and routines into our basal ganglia.
Exactly. And that frees up space on our stage for the important thinking stuff.
So create routines for checking emails, organizing files, starting projects, all those things we do all the time.
Exactly. The more we automate, the more brain power we free up for the stuff that really matters.
And that brings us to another big challenge, right? Distractions. They're everywhere.
Ugh, tell me about it. It's a constant battle to stay focused. Rock actually talks about this a lot.
He says our modern world is full of distractions and it's actually hurting our productivity.
Oh, absolutely. There's tons of research on that.
So our brains are wired to pay attention to new things, to react to anything that seems important, right?
Right. Survival instinct, Problem is, now everything pings and buzzes and demands our attention.
So it's like our brains are constantly being pulled in different directions.
Exactly. And Rock introduces this part of the brain, the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex. It's a mouthful.
The LPFC.
Yeah, that one. He calls it the brain's braking system, the part that helps us filter out distractions and stay focused.
Okay, but like our brakes can get worn out, right?
Exactly. The VLPFC is actually like really fragile and it gets tired easily, especially with all these constant distractions.
So like when you feel totally powerless to resist checking your phone.
That's your VLPFC tapping out. Needs a break.
So it's not just willpower, it's actually our brain chemistry.
Exactly. Our brains are wired to seek out novelty and reward.
Which explains why social media is so addictive. It's designed to trigger those dopamine hits.
Right. And those distractions, they hijack our attention. Even when we know we should be focused on something else, it's a real struggle.
Okay, so let's talk about emotions, because honestly, they play such a huge role in how we work.
Oh, emotions, the fuel and the fire of the workplace.
Rock gets into this, how our brains are constantly making these split-second decisions like toward or away, based on if something seems like a threat or a reward.
Right. That's our limbic system in action, like the oldest part of our brain wired for survival.
So it's not always rational.
Definitely not. Like, you're in a meeting and someone says something and you just like react, maybe get defensive or shut down.
Oh, or that feeling when you're facing a tight deadline and you just like freeze up.
That's your limbic system taking over, hijacking your rational thinking. Like it sees a threat, real or imagined, and boom, you're flooded with stress hormones.
So how do we like control those emotional outbursts?
Yeah.
Especially at work, where it can be, not a good look.
Right. Well, Rock has a couple of interesting techniques. First, there's labeling, where you actually like name the emotion you're feeling.
So instead of just feeling overwhelmed, you say, okay, I'm feeling anxious right now.
Exactly. It sounds simple, but there's research, like by Matthew Lieberman, showing that just naming the emotion actually helps reduce its intensity.
Interesting. Like you're acknowledging it instead of letting it control you.
Right. And the second technique is called cognitive reappraisal.
Which is,
it's like consciously changing how you're thinking about a situation. Like if you're stressed about a presentation, instead of thinking, I'm going to mess this up, you think, this is a chance to share my ideas and learn something new.
so you're reframing the situation to change how you feel about it.
Exactly. It takes practice, but it can really help you manage those emotional responses.
Okay, now let's get into the social stuff, because honestly, work is all about interacting with other people.
Oh, the human jungle, right.
And Rock has this model called SCARF, which stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness.
SCARF. Yeah, it's basically like a map of the social triggers that can either make us feel good or make us feel threatened.
Okay, so explain that.
So like status is about our perceived importance, right? If we feel like our status is threatened, like someone's undermining us, our brain sees that as a threat, just like a physical threat.
And certainty is about like knowing what's going to happen.
Right, predictability. If things are uncertain, our brain freaks out a little, tries to figure out what's going on. Autonomy is about feeling in control. Relatedness is about feeling connected to others.
And fairness.
Oh, fairness.
Exactly. And Rock's point is, like, when these needs are met, our brains reward us with, dopamine, feel-good chemicals. But when they're threatened, it triggers a stress response.
So understanding SCARF can help us like navigate those tricky social situations at work.
Absolutely. Helps you understand why you react the way you do and how to like create a more positive and supportive environment for yourself and others.
So moving on, Rock spends a lot of time talking about goal setting. Seems obvious, but he has some interesting insights there.
Oh yeah, goal setting is crucial, but it's not just about like picking any old goal.
He talks about toward goals versus away goals.
Exactly. Toward goals are about like what you want to achieve. They make you feel motivated, excited, like you're moving towards something good.
And away goals those are focused on avoiding something bad. Like, I don't want to fail this project.
Which actually probably makes you more stressed.
Exactly, because you're focused on the negative. Rock says, like, toward goals actually spark dopamine in the brain, which makes us feel good and keeps us motivated.
So frame your goals positively. Focus on what you want to achieve, not what you want to avoid.
Much more effective. Your brain will thank you for it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And finally, Rock brings up this idea of attention density.
Ah, yes. Attention density, like the secret sauce of, well, pretty much everything.
What exactly is it?
It's the idea that, like, the more we focus on something, the stronger those neural connections become in our brain.
So like Practice makes perfect.
More like focus makes permanent. He uses
Yeah.
this analogy of a garden, right? You need to water the plants consistently for them to grow.
So consistent focus is like watering our mental garden.
Exactly. Helps us develop new skills, learn new things, even like change our brains over time.
So if we want to be more productive, more creative, less stressed,
Focus is key. Train that attention muscle, and you can literally shape your brain for the better.
that's pretty amazing to think about, honestly,
It is. Our brains are way more powerful than we realize.
and much more adaptable than we think.
Absolutely.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, and I feel like we're just scratching the surface.
Oh, there's so much more to unpack.
But these insights from Rock are already giving us so much to think about.
Right. I mean, who knew our brains were this fascinating?
Seriously.
It's like we're walking around with these supercomputers in our heads, and we're only just starting to learn how to use them.
Exactly. It's like we've been given this amazing tool, and Rock is giving us the instruction manual.
And the best part is, we can all learn to use it better.
Absolutely. So listeners, if you're intrigued by what you've heard so far,
Definitely check out Your Brain at Work.
it's packed with even more fascinating insights and practical strategies. We'll be back soon to dive even deeper.
Can't wait.
It's amazing how all these things connect, and how just understanding how our brains work can really help us make better choices at work.
It's like having a secret weapon.
Totally. We were talking about social dynamics before, and something Rock talks about is how social interactions can actually impact our brain just as much as physical things if we get enough sleep or eat right.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about. Our brains are wired to be social, We're constantly trying to figure out where we fit in, who we're connected to.
So feeling rejected or left out can actually cause real pain.
Real pain. Literally,
Yeah.
the same areas of the brain light up when we experience social pain as when we experience physical pain.
Wow. So it's not just in our heads, it's a real physiological response.
Exactly. So think about that in a work setting, right? If you're constantly feeling stressed about your relationships with colleagues or worried about fitting in.
That's going to impact your ability to focus and do your best work.
Oh, absolutely. Which is why Rock emphasizes, creating a psychologically safe environment at work where people feel comfortable taking risks, sharing their ideas, being themselves.
So it's not just about being nice, it's about creating the right conditions for our brains to actually thrive.
Exactly. When you feel safe and supported, your brain can let go of those anxieties and focus on the task at hand.
Makes sense. And Rock also points out that even really small social cues can have a big impact on our brains.
Oh, yeah, those little micro interactions, they can make or break your day.
Like what? Give me an example.
Think about getting a genuine compliment from a colleague. That can trigger a release of dopamine, which makes you feel good.
Oh, for sure. A little boost of happiness.
Right. And that strengthens those social bonds, makes you feel more connected, more motivated. But on the flip side, if someone's being dismissive or not making eye contact.
Ooh, that feels bad.
Right. And your brain interprets that as a threat. You might start feeling anxious, defensive.
And that's going to affect how you work.
Totally. So being aware of these subtle cues and how they impact us, it's like a superpower.
It's like being fluent in the language of the social brain.
Exactly. You can read the room, understand what's going on beneath the surface, and respond in a way that creates positive connections.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about mindfulness. I always thought of mindfulness as a personal thing, for meditation and relaxation.
Yeah, it definitely have those benefits. But Rock actually makes a really strong case for mindfulness in the workplace.
Really? How so?
He says mindfulness isn't just about chilling out. It's actually a mental skill that can help you focus better, manage your emotions, make clear decisions.
Wait, so being mindful can actually make you more productive?
Absolutely. It's about training your brain to be more present, more aware of what's going on, both inside and outside of you.
Okay, but how do you actually do that? At work when you're busy and stressed and...
It doesn't have to be complicated. It's more about creating those little moments of awareness throughout the day. Before you go into a meeting, take a few deep breaths, pay attention to how your body feels. Or when you're eating lunch, actually savor each bite instead of just shoveling it in.
So just slow down and pay attention.
Exactly. It's about noticing your thoughts and feelings without judgment, becoming more aware of your patterns.
So instead of just reacting automatically,
Yeah.
you have more control.
Right. You create a space between the stimulus and your response, which gives you more choice.
That's really powerful. And Rock says you don't have to spend hours meditating to get these benefits.
Nope. Even just a few minutes here and there can make a big difference.
That's good to know. I can definitely fit that in. So basically, mindfulness is like a workout for your brain.
Totally. The more you practice, the stronger your attention muscle gets. And the better you get at managing distractions, regulating your emotions.
And making clear decisions under pressure.
Exactly. It's like a superpower for the modern workplace.
I like that. A mindfulness superpower.
We all need it.
Okay, before we wrap up, I just want to reiterate that our understanding of the brain is still evolving.
Oh, absolutely. We're learning new things all the time.
So what Rock presents in this book, it's not like the final word, but it's a really helpful framework.
A starting point. It gives us a language to talk about these things and some tools to start experimenting with.
And it's really empowering to know that our brains are so adaptable, so capable of change.
Right. We're not stuck with the brains we were born with. We can actually shape and mold them through our experiences, our choices.
Even our thoughts.
Exactly. That's the beauty of it.
So should we recap some of the key points from this part before we move on to the final stretch of our deep dive?
Sure, let's do it. What have we learned so far?
Well, we talked about how crucial it is to create a psychologically safe environment at work.
Right, so people feel comfortable being themselves, taking risks, sharing their ideas.
Because social threats, like feeling excluded or judged, can actually impact our brains just as much as physical threats.
And we explored how those tiny social cues, like a smile or a dismissive tone, can trigger these big neurochemical cascades that affect our mood, our focus, our performance.
Which was why emotional intelligence is so important.
Absolutely. Being able to read those cues and respond in a way that builds connection and trust.
And then we talked about mindfulness, not just as a way to relax, but as a mental skill that can help us be more focused, more aware, and less reactive.
Right. Even incorporating small mindfulness practices into our workday can make a big difference in how we manage stress and distractions.
And the most important takeaway, I think, is that our brains are incredibly adaptable.
We have more power than we realize to shape our mental landscapes and create work lives that are both productive and fulfilling.
All right, so we're diving into the final part of our exploration of your brain at work, and I'm really curious to see where Rock takes us next.
Well, one of the big ideas that keeps coming up is this tension between how our brains evolved and the demands of our modern work lives.
We touched on that a bit before, right? Our brains haven't quite caught up to the digital age.
Exactly. Think about it. Our brains developed over millions of years, to survive in a world that was very different from what we have now.
So, we're wired to respond to immediate threats, not to, manage a million emails and notifications.
Right. Back then, it was all about, finding food, avoiding predators, staying alive. Our brains got really good at that.
But now those same instincts, those same stress responses, they get triggered by things like deadlines and presentations and never-ending to-do lists.
It's like our brains are stuck in overdrive, and it's no wonder so many people feel overwhelmed and burned out.
So it's not that we're not capable of handling these modern demands. It's that our brains need a little help adapting.
Exactly. We need to be more intentional about how we work, how we manage our energy, how we protect our focus.
So instead of blaming ourselves for feeling distracted or stressed,
Yeah.
we need to understand how our brains work and work with them, not against them.
Exactly. Rock talks a lot about the importance of downtime, giving our brains a chance to rest and recharge.
So things like taking breaks, getting enough sleep, disconnecting from technology.
All crucial for keeping our brains functioning at their best.
Makes sense. Now, there's another really interesting concept that Rock brings up, the idea that our brains are constantly predicting what's going to happen next.
Oh, yeah, that's a fascinating one. Our brains are always trying to anticipate the future based on our past experiences and current information.
So it's our brains are building these mental models of the world.
Exactly. And these models help us make sense of things, make decisions, navigate our surroundings.
But what happens when something unexpected happens? When our predictions are wrong?
Well, that's when things get interesting. Our brains don't like surprises.
So even if the surprise is a good thing, it can still trigger a stress response.
Exactly, because it disrupts our predictions, forces our brains to recalibrate and figure out what's going on.
So a sudden change in plans, even if it's a positive change, can still throw us off.
Totally. And that's why Rock talks about the importance of communicating change effectively, giving people as much information as possible, as early as possible.
So it's not just about like what the change is. It's about how we communicate it.
Exactly. The more predictable we can make things, the less stress our brains will experience.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, we've already talked about psychological safety and mindfulness, but Rock also emphasizes the importance of having a growth mindset.
Oh, a growth mindset is so crucial, especially in today's world.
Remind me what a growth mindset is again.
It's basically the belief that our abilities, our intelligence, they're not fixed. We can always learn and grow and improve.
So instead of seeing challenges as like threats, we see them as opportunities.
Exactly. We're not afraid to make mistakes because we know that mistakes are just part of the learning process.
And Rock argues that a growth mindset is particularly important at work, right?
Absolutely. The world is changing so fast, we need to be constantly learning and adapting. And a growth mindset helps us do that.
So embracing challenges, seeking feedback, believing in our ability to learn and grow.
That's the key to thriving in a world that's constantly evolving.
I love that. Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive into your brain at work, I think it would be really helpful to kind of synthesize everything we've learned.
Totally agree. Let's distill these insights into like a 10-point summary, a brain-boosting toolkit, if you will.
I love it. Okay, so listeners, here are 10 key takeaways from your brain at work that you can start applying today.
Number 1, remember that your prefrontal cortex, your brain's command center, has limited capacity. Prioritize your tasks, schedule your most demanding work for when you have the most energy, and avoid multitasking.
Number 2, embrace single tasking. Focus on one thing at a time to maximize your accuracy, efficiency, and well-being.
Number 3, manage distractions like a pro. Create boundaries, minimize interruptions, and protect your attention to keep your brain's braking system functioning properly.
Number 4, become a master of your emotions. Use techniques like labeling and cognitive reappraisal to navigate challenging situations and make thoughtful decisions.
Number 5, understand the power of social dynamics. Use the SCARF model to build strong relationships, create a sense of psychological safety, and minimize social threats.
Number 6, set goals that motivate you. Frame your goals positively, focusing on what you want to achieve, not what you want to avoid.
Number 7, cultivate attention density. Consistent focus strengthens neural connections, leading to lasting change and growth.
Number 8, embrace a growth mindset. See challenges as opportunities, seek feedback, and believe in your ability to learn and improve.
Number 9, give your brain the downtime it needs. Prioritize sleep, take breaks, and disconnect from technology regularly to restore your cognitive resources.
And number 10, communicate change effectively. Involve people in decision-making processes to minimize uncertainty and stress.
There you have it, a 10-point plan for optimizing your brain power and transforming your work life.
It's amazing to think that we all have this incredible potential within us, just waiting to be unlocked.
And by understanding how our brains work, we can tap into that potential and create work lives that are both successful and fulfilling.
Absolutely. So listeners, we encourage you to dive deeper into your brain at work and explore these concepts for yourselves.
It's a journey of self-discovery that can truly change the way you work and live.
And until next time, keep those brains buzzing.